I'm Olivia Hartman, 34, freelance editor, and until recently, broke enough that even the thrift store felt like a splurge. The invitation arrived in a pale blue envelope, heavy with faux elegance. Embossed gold lettering spelled out, "The Hartman Family Reunion, celebrating 20 years of togetherness. A catered weekend at a rented estate in upstate New York. Dress code, cocktail casual, RSVP required." I stared at the card, heart thudding. It had been 5 years since I last saw most of my family. I had reasons, financial struggles, heartbreak, the kind of life messiness people like my sister Madison avoided like bad lighting. But the real reason? I was tired of being the family disappointment. Still, something about this invite felt different. Maybe it was the formal tone, or the sense that this would be the reunion to remember. I almost tossed it in the trash, until I flipped the card and read, "There will be a family legacy presentation on Saturday night. All members encouraged to attend." That word, legacy, hit me like a punch. Because for most of my life, I didn't have one. Before we continue, I want to know, have you ever skipped a family event because you just couldn't face the judgment? Drop a comment below. And if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who dismissed you, hit that like button. Trust me, you're not alone. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The bookworm. The girl with big ideas and secondhand shoes. My parents, Janet and William Hartman, were proud in a quiet, restrained way. Of Madison. Always Madison. She was the star, head cheerleader, business school prodigy. Now a branding consultant with a sleek condo and a fiancé who manages hedge funds. Meanwhile, I took out student loans to study literature. I freelanced while living in shared apartments and ate a lot of rice and frozen peas. They didn't understand that path, especially not after the divorce. 3 years ago, I married Aaron. It was passionate, poetic, and a disaster. He was a writer, too. We dreamed of creative freedom but lived paycheck to paycheck until the checks stopped coming. He left a note and a stack of unpaid bills. No explanation. No goodbye. Just, "I can't do this anymore." That was rock bottom. For the next year, I worked nights at a cafe while editing manuscripts by day. I barely spoke to my family. Madison sent the occasional text. "Hope you're okay." Mom forwarded job links. Dad asked if I'd thought about real work, but I knew the subtext. You failed. Again. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that something had shifted in the last 18 months. Quietly. Behind the scenes. But I'll get to that. The reunion weekend arrived faster than expected. I didn't RSVP, I didn't confirm. I just showed up. The estate was sprawling, ivy-covered walls, grand staircases, white tents strung with fairy lights. Everyone was there. The whole extended Hartman clan. Uncles, aunts, second cousins, all dressed like walking Pinterest boards. I wore a navy blue dress I'd found in a Brooklyn thrift store for $8. It had a small tear at the hem, which I'd stitched by hand. My shoes were clean but scuffed. My hair, usually tucked in a bun for convenience, was styled in soft curls that morning. I even wore lipstick, a rare move. As I walked toward the entrance, I spotted Madison near the mimosa bar, surrounded by her usual entourage. She caught sight of me and raised an eyebrow. "Well, well," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby. "Still broke, huh?" Her eyes scanned me like a price tag. Or is thrift chic a thing again? Laughter. Software cutting. I smiled politely, heart hammering. "Nice to see you too, Madison." She blinked as if surprised I responded at all. Before she could reply, Uncle Rob swept in and handed her a drink. I walked past them and into the ballroom, determined to stay invisible. Then I saw it. The screen. Floor to ceiling, centered above the fireplace. A note on the evening program read, 7 p.m. The Hartman Legacy, Family Impact Reel. Something inside me twisted. They were going to play their highlight reels, Madison's TEDx talk, Cousin Ella's nonprofit award, Probably footage of Grandpa cutting the ribbon at the first Hartman Foundation school in Kenya. No one would expect to see me on that screen. But I knew what was coming. And when that reel started playing, everything, every whisper, every sneer, every judgment was about to be swallowed by the truth. They had no idea what I'd done. Not yet. By 6:45 p.m., the ballroom buzzed with forced laughter and the sound of champagne flutes clinking. The family reunion was in full swing, and I had become exactly what they expected. Background noise. My mother waved me over once, briefly. "Olivia, sweetie, glad you made it." Then she turned back to her conversation about cruise packages with Aunt Doreen. My dad gave me a one-armed hug and asked, "Still doing that proofreading thing?" I nodded. "Editing," I corrected softly, but he was already checking his watch. I'd never felt more invisible. Dinner was a buffet of overpriced appetizers with French names and no seasoning. Madison made a show of announcing her engagement to Preston, flashing a ring so large it could have signaled aircraft. Everyone applauded. Cameras flashed. Her moment. Again. By the time the MC tapped the mic to announce the Hartman Legacy presentation, I was practically forgotten. Until the lights dimmed. Please turn your attention to the screen as we celebrate the accomplishments of the Hartman family. 20 years of legacy, leadership, and love. The first slide was exactly what I expected. Grandpa cutting a red ribbon. Aunt Carla shaking hands with the senator. Madison grinning at a podium. I sipped my water and waited. Then the screen went black, and a new video began. It opened with soft piano music and a black screen with white text. Sometimes legacies are built quietly, until they speak for themselves. Madison's smile faltered. Mom looked confused. I sat still. The video began to play clips from a digital platform. One few of them would recognize. Bookverse. A narrator's voice came through. Professional, calm, proud. Bookverse, the world's fastest-growing editorial community, with over 40,000 writers, 8 million monthly readers, and one mission, to elevate voices that matter. Founded in 2021 by Olivia Hartman. Madison's head snapped toward me. Bookverse started in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, with a single laptop and a woman who believed that words could build bridges. My face appeared on the screen. An old photo. Candid, me at my tiny kitchen table, surrounded by sticky notes and a cold cup of tea. Gasps rippled across the room. I didn't move. In just 18 months, Bookverse partnered with 120 publishing houses, hosted over 300 virtual author events, and launched writing scholarships in underrepresented communities. Screenshots of headlines flashed by. Brooklyn woman disrupts traditional publishing. Forbes 30 under 35. Olivia Hartman changes the game. Bookverse raises $12 million in funding. I didn't blink. I couldn't. But my hands trembled slightly in my lap. The narrator continued. This is the legacy of someone they once called just a bookworm. The woman who turned heartbreak into purpose, rejection into reach. The girl they ignored at the dinner table, now building one where everyone has a seat. The screen faded to black again. Then my face returned. A video clip. I remembered recording it 6 months ago at the request of my communications director. I'd thought it was for internal use only. I used to think success meant approval, validation. That if I could just become something impressive, they'd finally see me. But I've learned, you don't need to be seen to be powerful. You just need to know your own worth. That's where everything begins. The screen faded once more. Then a single sentence appeared. Legacy isn't what they remember you for. It's what you build while they're not looking. Silence. Then the lights came back on. The room was frozen. Forks midair, jaws half open. My mother looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. My father blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what just happened. Madison stared at me like I'd shapeshifted. For the first time in my life, I had taken up space in a room full of people who once looked right through me. Before I continue, tell me in the comments, Have you ever shocked people who underestimated you? Ever walked into a room and made them regret counting you out? This story's not over, because the real drama hadn't even started yet. Preston, Madison's fiancé, leaned in toward her and whispered something. She looked at him, then looked at me, then stood up. Nobody told me she was that Olivia Hartman, she snapped. The room turned to her. She tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. This whole time you've been, secretly successful? Why not say anything, Liv? I stood up slowly, calm, centered, because I wanted to see who treated me like a person before they saw me as a headline. And then I walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned silence, past the glittering lights, and out into the cool evening air. They weren't done talking, but neither was I. The sound of the ballroom doors clicking shut behind me was sharper than I expected, like the final note in a symphony I never asked to perform. Outside, the air was cool, but I was burning. My hands trembled, not from shame or fear, but adrenaline. I hadn't planned for that video to play. It was my assistant, Marcus, who had uploaded it at the request of the event planner. Apparently, she'd reached out for any family legacy materials from all branches. He'd assumed I'd approved it. I hadn't. But in hindsight, maybe it was time. As I leaned against the stone wall of the patio, trying to slow my breathing, the door creaked open. Footsteps. I didn't turn around. Olivia, Madison's voice called out, clipped and sharp like a stiletto's on marble. I turned slowly. She stood framed in the doorway, her flawless curls still perfectly pinned, but her expression was tight. Tense. Wounded? Maybe. You blindsided us, she said, arms crossed. Did I? I replied, my voice calm. Or were you just too busy looking past me to notice? She blinked. You've built a whole company, a movement apparently, and you didn't tell anyone. I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't performing it. Madison laughed, one of those hollow, incredulous laughs that never reaches the eyes. No, you waited. You waited for your moment. You could have told me. Would it have mattered? I asked, stepping toward her. Would you have listened without comparing? Without reminding me how you did it faster, better, louder? She hesitated. I wanted to be proud of you, she said, quieter now. But tonight made me feel like the fool. I took a breath. For years, that's exactly how I felt. At every family gathering, every dinner table. Every time Mom asked how your consulting was going and skipped right over me. Her face softened, almost imperceptibly. You're right, she said, surprising me. You're absolutely right. That stunned me into silence. I've made this whole family about appearances, she added, about status and who's got the flashiest title or the biggest ring. But tonight you had something none of us did. Authenticity? I offered. She nodded, then gave a sad smile. And maybe actual meaning. Before I could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Preston. Olivia, he said. Could we talk for a minute? Madison's eyes darted to him, wary. Alone. I glanced at her. She nodded and stepped aside, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Preston approached, hands in his pockets. I had no idea you were that Olivia Hartman, he began. I use book verse. I raised a brow. You're a writer? Finance blog, he said sheepishly. But still, I've followed your work for over a year. The privacy features, the community moderation, the storytelling focus, it's genius. I said nothing. What you did tonight, he continued, it changed the tone of this whole event. For once, it wasn't about who's wearing what or who's engaged to whom. It was about something real. Why are you telling me this? I asked, suspicious. Because, he said slowly, Madison isn't who I thought she was. Ah, there it was. He hesitated. A good person, but her world is curated. Everything has to be filtered and glossy. But I watched you walk in tonight wearing a thrift store dress and still command the entire room. That's rare. I felt an old instinct rise, the urge to apologize for making things uncomfortable, but I buried it. I'm not here to be compared, I said. I know, he replied quickly. And I'm not trying to flirt. I just needed to say it. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone again under the stars. Inside, I could hear music starting up again. The party was resuming, but the atmosphere had shifted, and I could feel it even from here. Before I go on, have you ever had a moment where everything flipped? Where the people who judged you suddenly had to reckon with who you really are? Share it in the comments. Because those moments, they stay with you. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. You're trending. I blinked. What? Attached was a link to a video someone had posted of the Hartman legacy clip. It had already reached 180,000 views in 2 hours. Comments were pouring in. This woman's story gave me chills. Proof you don't need to scream to be powerful. Who else Googled Olivia Hartman and ended up inspired? And then the one that made me stop cold. I wish my family saw me like this. Thank you, Olivia. I stared at the screen, the comments a blur. I hadn't just been seen, I had been felt. I slipped the phone back into my purse, and this time, when I walked back toward the ballroom, it wasn't with the weight of proving anything. It was with the quiet power of someone who finally knew what she was worth. And that changed everything. I walked back into the ballroom like I had nothing to prove. Because for the first time in years, I truly didn't. The laughter, once sharp and guarded, was now laced with hesitation. The same people who had barely acknowledged me during appetizers were suddenly all smiles and curiosity. I'd seen it before. This type of shift. The same people who dismiss you when you're struggling are the first to rewrite your story when success makes you visible. Aunt Doreen was the first to pounce. Olivia, darling, she crooned, grabbing my hands. Why didn't you tell us about your little company? We would have loved to support you. Little company? It's not that little anymore, I said with a tight smile. But thank you. Oh, I just adore female entrepreneurs, she gushed. So empowering. Her tone made me feel like I'd won a baking contest, not built a digital empire. Across the room, Mom stood stiffly by the dessert table, her eyes tracking me like a hawk. She hadn't said a word since the video. I approached her cautiously. Hi, Mom. She cleared her throat. That video? It was impressive. Thank you. Long pause. You could have told us, she added, her voice brittle. I had no idea. I know. That was kind of the point. She flinched, then softened. Is this what you've been doing all this time? The long hours, the missed birthdays? I nodded. Why didn't you ever just ask for help? I let that hang in the air for a second. Because whenever I struggled, you said things like, you chose that path. Or, maybe it's time to get serious. You didn't see me, Mom. You saw a mistake you couldn't fix. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I wasn't asking for help, I continued. I was asking for support. There's a difference. She stared at the floor, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. I'm sorry, she whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. From the stage, Uncle Rob announced that the dance floor was open. People began trickling toward the center of the room. Laughter returned. Lighter this time, though tinged with curiosity and discomfort. And then, of course, Madison took the mic. Before the next song, I just want to say how proud we all are of Olivia. What an unexpected success story. There it was, the backhanded compliment. Some people clapped politely. Others looked at her, then at me, unsure of what to do. Madison smiled wide, her eyes gleaming. So rare to see passion and profit align, isn't it? I walked slowly up to her and took the mic gently from her hand. She didn't fight it, but her smile faded slightly. Thanks, Madison, I said, turning to the crowd. It's true. Sometimes success is unexpected, especially by those closest to us. A few heads turned, a few eyebrows lifted. But let me say this clearly. My story isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving myself right. I looked directly at Madison and realizing that the only validation worth chasing is your own. Then I set the mic down and stepped off the stage, heart pounding but steady. People applauded, not the loud kind that comes from politeness, but the scattered, slow kind that comes from people who are thinking. That's when I saw her, Grandma Ruth. She'd stayed seated in the far corner the whole night, mostly quiet, sipping tea and observing. Her eyes met mine and she gave me the faintest nod. When I reached her, she patted the seat beside her. "You always were the sharp one," she said. "Quiet, but sharp." I smiled. "You knew?" "I didn't need headlines to know your worth, sweetheart, but it's nice to see the rest of them catching up." I blinked back sudden tears. Of all the people I wanted to make proud, she had never once made me feel small. "Madison's always been the peacock," Grandma added. You're the hawk. People don't see you coming until it's too late." That made me laugh. She leaned closer. "But don't let them make you bitter, Liv. Don't confuse silence with defeat, or applause with love." That hit me harder than anything else tonight. Before I continue, have you ever had someone finally see you when it mattered most? Drop it in the comments. Or tag someone who did that for you, because sometimes one person noticing you can change everything. The band started up again. Couples swayed on the floor. For a moment, it looked like any other party. But under the surface, everything had changed. Because now they were wondering what else I'd been building in silence. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with the kind of emotional hangover no amount of sleep could cure. My phone was buzzing again. Notifications, articles, DMs. Overnight, the video had crossed 1 million views. 1 million! Marcus texted me. Bookverse servers handled the spike. Also, publishers are calling. Lots of them. I rubbed my eyes and opened Instagram. Someone had posted a clip of my line from the mic last night. "The only validation worth chasing is your own." It had already been reshared by several popular empowerment accounts. My follower count had doubled. So had the inquiries. But what stood out the most were the messages from strangers. I watched this with tears in my eyes. I needed to hear that. I've been hiding my startup from my family for fear of being judged. Not anymore. You made me feel like I wasn't alone. And then, tucked between all the glowing responses, was a single DM that stopped me cold. From Aaron W. Message. "Congratulations. I always knew you'd find your voice. I'm sorry I didn't stick around long enough to hear it. Aaron, my ex-husband." I stared at his message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, deeper, older, wanted to respond. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned off my phone and pulled open the curtains. The morning light spilled across the carpet, golden and soft, and for the first time in years, I felt steady. Later that afternoon, as I checked out of the hotel, I passed the lounge where several family members were gathered. Madison spotted me first. "Liv," she called out, getting up from the couch. "Can we talk?" She didn't look smug this time. She looked tired. We walked outside to the garden where yesterday's cocktail tables still stood, empty and stained with glass rings. She clasped her hands together, uncharacteristically nervous. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Not just for the comments or the mic thing, for a lot." I waited. For years, I let the spotlight turn me into someone I don't like. And I pushed you out of it without even realizing how hard you were trying to earn a seat at the table. "I wasn't trying to earn it," I corrected. "I was trying to stop needing it." She nodded. "That's even worse, because I made you feel like it wasn't even yours to begin with." Silence hung between us like fog. Then she added, "I'm not happy, Olivia." "Not really. Preston and I—" She stopped. "It's not what it looks like." I raised an eyebrow. "That's surprising." She half laughed, then turned serious again. You're the first one in the family to break the pattern, to build something that doesn't revolve around appearances. That took guts. I looked at her for a long moment. My sister. My rival. My mirror. You don't have to live in the version of you they built, I said quietly. You're allowed to start over. Her eyes welled up. Do you think it's too late? No, I said, meaning it. But you have to want the truth more than the image. She wiped her eyes and gave me a smile so unguarded it almost broke me. I'd like to know you better, she said. Not compete. Just know you. That would be nice, I replied, feeling something shift. Something old, bitter, loosening its grip. Before we left the garden, she reached into her purse and handed me something. What's this? An RSVP card, she said, for my next event. A women's entrepreneur panel. Real women. Real stories. I want you to be the keynote. I stared at it. You sure they want someone who shops thrift and doesn't sugarcoat their past? She grinned. That's exactly who they want. As I drove away from the estate, past the rolling hills and ivy-covered walls, I thought about how this weekend had started, with pity, judgment, and quiet humiliation. But I was leaving with something else. Not vindication, not revenge, but recognition. And with it, a reminder I want you to carry with you. You do not need their permission to be powerful. You do not need to be flashy to be valid. And you do not need to be invited to build something unforgettable. Sometimes the table doesn't need to be flipped. Sometimes you build your own. And when you do, they'll hear the echo. 2 weeks after the reunion, life didn't dramatically change. There was no parade, no sudden validation from all corners of the world. But something inside me had shifted, and that, more than anything, was the win. I was back in Brooklyn, seated at my favorite coffee shop. Same table by the window, same chipped mug, same almond croissant. But for the first time, I wasn't writing to escape. I was writing because I could breathe. My inbox still buzzed with media inquiries and publisher pitches, but I wasn't chasing any of it. I'd done enough chasing in my life. Now things were coming to me. Respect, opportunities, recognition. All the things I used to beg for in rooms that barely noticed I was there. And then, on a Wednesday morning, my doorbell rang. Madison. She held a reusable shopping bag filled with lemons and fresh rosemary and a single box of dry pasta. I brought dinner, she said. I stared at her. You cook? She laughed. Not well, but I'm trying. We ended up making lemon garlic pasta together in my tiny kitchen. She cried twice, once when she couldn't figure out how to zest the lemon, and once when she accidentally spilled olive oil on her blouse. But it wasn't dramatic. It was real, human, unfiltered. Over dinner, she told me she and Preston had broken off the engagement. He said he didn't sign up for a woman who was still figuring herself out. Sounds like he didn't understand what growth looks like, I said. He understood perfectly. He just didn't want to wait for it. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. And somewhere between the awkward clinks of mismatched forks and laughter over how overcooked the pasta was, we started stitching something back together. Not as competitors, not even as siblings trying to outdo each other. Just two women who were finally learning how to be honest. Before she left that night, she paused at the door. You know, she said, you looked powerful that night at the reunion. Not because of the company, not because of the video, but because you didn't flinch when they laughed. I blinked. I flinched on the inside, I admitted. She nodded. Still, you stood there anyway, and I saw it, that quiet strength. Then she hugged me. A long, real hug, the kind we hadn't shared since we were kids in matching holiday pajamas. A few days later, I visited my parents. It wasn't a dramatic showdown, or a perfectly healed moment. It was awkward, as those things often are. Mom apologized again, in her own way. Through overfeeding me, straightening my collar and asking too many questions about how to invest in tech stocks. Dad didn't say much, but when I was leaving, he walked me to the car and said, "I read that article about Bookverse. You built something real, kid." Then, after a beat, "Wish I'd told you sooner I was proud." I didn't cry until I got back to my apartment, because it wasn't about their words. It was about finally not needing them. Before I close this story, I want to share something with you. The person listening, watching, reading. When they underestimate you. When they talk over you at dinner. When they call your dreams unrealistic or laugh at your outfit or forget your name when listing the successful cousins. You have a choice. You can shrink. Or you can keep building quietly. Because one day, your truth will be too loud to ignore. And when that day comes, you don't have to gloat. You don't have to say a word. Just show up. In your thrift store dress. With your real laugh. And your quiet, undeniable power. Because you are already enough. You've been enough this whole time. They just took a little too long to see it.